My son made me clean his house to humiliate me, not knowing that in my purse I carried the document that would strip him of the mansion. I never thought the hands that once comforted his childhood tears would end up scrubbing his toilet while he pretended not to see me. Today I'm going to tell you something I never thought I would. And if you, for a second, feel like this sounds familiar, I just ask that you leave a like and subscribe. It will help me to keep unburdening myself. My name is Carol Henderson. I'm 63 years old, and I live in New York City, in the same Queens neighborhood where I raised my son, Michael. My hands are marked by 40 years of work, first as a seamstress in a garment district factory, then caring for my sick husband until his last breath, and now scrubbing the bathrooms of the mansion my own son bought with the money I gave him. This October morning, as the cold New York air seeped through the windows of his house in Westchester, I woke up at 6, as always, but not in my bed, not in my small but dignified apartment in Queens. I woke up in Michael's utility room, on a mattress that smelled of damp, with a blanket so thin I could feel the chill seeping into my arthritic bones. "It's just temporary, Mom," he had told me 2 weeks ago when he showed up at my door with that smile I knew so well. The same one he'd put on as a child when he'd broken something and needed my forgiveness. "Jessica is pregnant again, and we need help with the kids. Besides, the housekeeper left without notice. You always said family helps family, right?" Of course, I said yes. I'm a mother. Even though my knees creak every morning like old floorboards, even though my hands tremble holding anything heavy, even though my Social Security check barely allows me to live with dignity, I'm a mother, and mothers don't say no. I dressed in the same gray skirt I used to clean my own house, my white blouse now yellowed from so many washes, and my orthopedic shoes that sound like a ghost's footsteps on the gleaming marble of his kitchen. The kitchen I cleaned yesterday, and the day before, and every day since I got here, while I was making coffee in that Italian espresso machine that costs more than 2 of my monthly Social Security checks. I heard voices from upstairs. Jessica, my daughter-in-law, was on the phone, her sharp voice always setting my nerves on edge. "No, you can't come over today. My mother-in-law is here cleaning. Yes, that old woman who smells like Jean Naté and shuffles when she walks. It's super awkward, but Michael insists it saves us money on a housekeeper." I felt something cold run down my spine, as if someone had opened the freezer door. My hands froze over the white porcelain cup, the one with little flowers painted on it that reminds me of the ones my mother used in our small town in upstate New York. For a moment, I thought I had misheard, that my hearing, not as sharp as it used to be, had played a trick on me. But then I heard the laugh, that crystalline, cruel laugh Jessica let out when she felt superior to someone. Of course she can stay as long as she wants. I mean, she works for free and doesn't complain. She's the perfect grandma, isn't she? The coffee spilled onto the marble countertop. My hands had started shaking without me realizing it. I stood there, in that kitchen that gleamed like a hospital, watching the dark coffee spread like a stain of humiliation on the perfect surface. In my purse, the same brown leather one my late husband Robert gave me for our 30th anniversary, rested a manila envelope. Inside that envelope was a document I had signed 3 weeks ago at a law office in Midtown, after discovering something that chilled me to the bone. Michael had been trying, behind my back, to transfer the deed of my summer house in the Hamptons into his name, the house that Robert and I bought 20 years ago, brick by brick, with our life savings. The house where I took Michael every summer until he turned 18, where I taught him to swim at Cooper's Beach, where we celebrated his graduations, and where Robert asked me, with tears in his eyes, never to sell it because it was our legacy. My lawyer, Ms. Eleanor Vance, a serious woman with gray hair pulled back in a perfect bun, had shown me the papers Michael had filed with the county clerk's office. "Mrs. Henderson," she had said in a grave voice, adjusting her reading glasses, "your son is claiming you no longer have the mental capacity to manage your properties. He says it's for your own good, for my own good." The same words he used as a teenager when he wanted to stay out late. "It's for your own good, Mom. You don't understand these things." But I did understand. I understood that my house in the Hamptons is worth nearly $1.5 million. I understood that Michael has debts he can't pay with his salary as a banking executive. I understood that his wife Jessica wants to live like a queen without working like one. And I understood, with a clarity that pained my soul, that to them I was not a mother. I was an opportunity. The document in my purse was the definitive revocation of any right Michael could claim over my property. I had signed it with a trembling but determined hand, while the lawyer asked me 3 times if I was sure of my decision. "Are you absolutely certain, Mrs. Henderson? This is an irreversible decision." "More certain than ever," I had replied, thinking of the times Michael had canceled Sunday dinners, of how he had stopped calling after Robert died, of how he only showed up when he needed money for the new car, for the vacations in Miami, for the down payment on the kids' private school. Now, as I wiped up the spilled coffee with a cloth that smelled of bleach, that document felt as heavy as a stone in my purse. I didn't know if I would have the courage to use it, but every hurtful word from Jessica, every contemptuous glance, every order disguised as a favor, brought me closer to that moment. "Carol!" Jessica's voice echoed from upstairs like a whip. "The kids spilled juice in their room, and the guest bathroom needs a good cleaning." I wiped away the tears I didn't know had started to fall, grabbed my cleaning caddy, the same one I use at my house, because they haven't even offered me rubber gloves here, and went up the stairs step by step, feeling my knees protest with each one. In the kids' room, my 6- and 9-year-old grandchildren had overturned an entire carton of orange juice on the Persian rug that cost more than all my furniture combined. They ran off as soon as they saw me, without a hello, without a smile, as if I were invisible. As I knelt on that expensive rug, scrubbing the orange stain that spread like a wound, I thought about the irony of it all. The woman who taught them to walk, who sang them lullabies when they had nightmares, who kept every drawing they made for me in a special box, was now just the lady who cleaned up their messes. The document in my purse seemed to beat like a heart, waiting for the moment when my dignity would outweigh my mother's love, and that moment, I knew deep in my soul, was coming faster than I had ever imagined. As I scrubbed Jessica's pink marble toilet, I remembered the first time Michael asked me for money. He was 25 and had lost his job at the bank for being constantly late. "It's only $5,000, Mom," he had told me with that little boy voice he knew would melt my heart. "I'll pay you back in 2 months, I promise." He never paid back a dime. My knees creaked against the cold bathroom floor as I scrubbed the hard water stains Jessica pretended not to see when I wasn't around. The smell of bleach mixed with my memories, creating a toxic fog that transported me to all those moments I said yes when I should have said no. Like when I sold my mother's engagement ring to pay the down payment on the apartment Michael lived in with his first girlfriend. "It's an investment, Mom," he had insisted as I signed the papers at the real estate office. "When I sell it, I'll give you your share." He sold the apartment 2 years later, but I never saw a penny. "I had to pay off some debts," was his only explanation. Or when Robert was in the hospital, fighting the cancer that slowly took him like a receding tide, Michael would visit on Sundays, always with the same somber expression, always with the same cold, calculated hug. But he never stayed for more than an hour, never offered to take a shift with me during the long nights, never asked if I needed anything. "My job is just so demanding, Mom." You understand, right? I understood that his job allowed him to buy a new Audi every 2 years while I took 3 buses to get to Mount Sinai Hospital because I couldn't afford a cab. I understood that his time was too valuable to be spent watching his father die. I understood that it was easier to send expensive flowers than to hold a withered hand in the painful early hours of the morning. The day Robert died, Michael arrived at the hospital after it was all over. He just stood there, in his expensive suit and shiny shoes, looking at his father's body as if it were a problem someone else should solve. "Have you spoken to the funeral home, Mom? I have an important meeting early tomorrow." That night, alone in my apartment that suddenly felt too big and too quiet, I found a shoebox under the bed that Robert had kept there. Inside were letters Michael had written to him as a child, drawings he had made in school, photos from family vacations where we all smiled as if the world were a good and safe place. In one of the letters, written in the crooked handwriting of an 8-year-old, Michael had drawn our family as stick figures. Dad tall and smiling, Mom in a blue dress, and him in the middle, holding both our hands. Below it, he had written, "When I grow up, I'm going to take care of Mommy and Daddy like they take care of me. I cried so much that night I thought I would run out of tears for the rest of my life, but the tears kept coming with every new request, every new financial crisis that, miraculously, only I could solve. Like when Jessica wanted a fairy tale wedding at a 5-star hotel in Newport. I just need you to lend me $20,000, Mom. Jessica's father can't contribute much, and I don't want her to feel bad. I emptied my savings account, the same one where I had saved penny by penny for my old age, for the day I could no longer work, for medical emergencies, to maintain a minimum of dignity when my strength ran out. All for a one-day party where they didn't even seat me at the main table. Jessica wants the parents' table to be more intimate, Michael explained as I watched from afar as they toasted their happiness with champagne that I had paid for. I sat with distant relatives and work friends, wearing the same black dress I had worn to Robert's funeral because I didn't have money to buy a new one. Jessica shone like a princess in her $3,000 dress, money that also came out of my pocket, while I forced a smile every time someone asked if I was proud of my son. Very proud, I would answer automatically, even though inside something was crumbling like an old building that could no longer support its own weight. I paid for the honeymoon in Bali, too. It's important to start the marriage off on the right foot, Mom. You know how these things are. No, I didn't know how these things were. Robert and I took a train to Niagara Falls for our honeymoon, stayed in a modest motel, and those were the 3 happiest days of my life because we were together and in love, and money didn't matter. But for Michael and Jessica, apparently, love was measured in exotic destinations and luxury hotels financed by a widow's Social Security. When the children were born, I thought things would change. I thought fatherhood would awaken in Michael that tenderness I remembered from when he was little, when he would curl up with me on the sofa to watch Sunday afternoon movies, when he would help me cook, standing on a chair because he couldn't reach the counter. Instead, the children became another list of expenses that, miraculously, I was expected to cover. Daycare is so expensive, Mom. Could you help us with the monthly payment? Just until I get that promotion. The promotion came, but my payments to the daycare continued. Then it was the bilingual school, then the extracurricular tennis and piano lessons, then the summer camps in Ireland. Every time I tried to suggest that perhaps they could afford some expenses on their own, Jessica would put on that martyred face she had perfected over the years. Carol, you don't realize how hard it is to raise children today. Everything is so expensive. We make huge sacrifices, but the children need the best to have a future. Huge sacrifices. While she got her nails done every week at a salon on Madison Avenue, and Michael upgraded his phone every time a new model came out, I finished cleaning the bathroom and stood up slowly, feeling my back twinge like an old spring. In the bathroom mirror, my reflection stared back at me. A 63-year-old woman with poorly cut gray hair because I couldn't afford a decent salon, deep wrinkles around my eyes, hands chapped from so many cleaning products, and an expression I didn't recognize. When had I started to look so defeated? I walked out of the bathroom and found Jessica in the hallway, dressed in a designer sweatsuit that cost more than my monthly check, talking on the phone with her manicurist. Yes, 3 o'clock is perfect. Oh, and ask Sandra if she can do my eyelashes too. We have an important dinner on Saturday. She saw me and covered the phone with her hand. Carol, when you're done with the bathrooms, could you iron Michael's shirts? He has presentations all week and you know how picky he is about his image. I nodded silently, as I had been doing my whole life, but as I went down the stairs to the laundry room, my fingers automatically tightened around the strap of my purse, feeling the reassuring presence of the manila envelope through the worn leather. For the first time in years, I thought that maybe the time had come to stop nodding silently. My 63rd birthday arrived on a gray Tuesday in November, as I was ironing Michael's shirts in the utility room that had become my bedroom. I waited all day for a call, a text, a happy birthday. Nothing, not even when I served dinner and sat at the corner of the table, because my usual spot was now occupied by a high chair for the baby on the way. Do you know what day it is today? I asked Michael as he cut his steak, the same cut of meat I couldn't afford even at Christmas. He glanced up from his phone, where he was checking emails with that absent expression he'd perfected to show that everything else was less important than his work. Tuesday, he answered, his eyes not leaving the screen. Jessica let out a little laugh as she poured herself more red wine, the same Napa Cabernet that was in the pantry and cost $40 a bottle. Carol, don't be so dramatic. Birthdays after 60 are depressing. It's better to just forget about them, right? That night, alone on my damp mattress, I cried like I hadn't cried since Robert's funeral. But they were silent, contained tears, because I had learned that in this house, my pain was as much of a nuisance as my presence. The following days became a succession of small but constant humiliations, like drops of water eroding a stone. Jessica had developed a subtle art of making me feel invisible while keeping me constantly busy. Carol, could you hand wash my lingerie? The machine ruins it and it's terribly expensive. She'd say it with that fake smile while painting her nails on the sofa I had just vacuumed. Or when guests came over, this is Carol, my mother-in-law. She's helping us out with the housework while we look for a new housekeeper. The word helping made it sound like a favor I was asking for, not a job I was performing unpaid for 14 hours a day. The children had learned to treat me like part of the furniture. They left their dirty dishes wherever they finished eating, spilled juice on the floor without telling me, and shouted orders from their rooms like spoiled little tyrants. Grandma Carol, come pick up my toys. Grandma Carol, make me a snack. Grandma Carol, find my backpack. Never please. Never thank you. Never a loving smile like the ones I remembered from when Michael was little and would hug me for anything, even for making him a glass of chocolate milk with Nesquik. One afternoon, while cleaning the living room windows, I heard Jessica on the phone with her mother. She was speaking quietly, but the walls of that house amplified everything, as if designed to hold no secrets. Yeah, Mom, she's still here. It's been 3 weeks. No, she doesn't pay for anything. Quite the opposite. She cleans for free and watches the kids. It's like having a live-in maid without the salary. She laughed that crystalline laugh that chilled my blood. Michael says it's temporary, but honestly, as long as she's willing to do all the dirty work, why not take advantage? Take advantage. That word hung in the air like toxic smoke. I put the window cleaner down on the sill and sat on the floor, my back against the cold wall, feeling something definitively break in my chest. It wasn't love they felt for me. It was pure, unadulterated convenience. But the worst was yet to come. On Thursday morning, while I was preparing breakfast, toast with homemade jam for the kids, freshly ground coffee for Michael, green tea with honey for Jessica because she was detoxing, I heard voices from Michael's office. The door was ajar, and curiosity, or perhaps a survival instinct, made me move closer. Michael was on the phone with someone, using that professional tone he reserved for important matters. Yes, exactly. The house in the Hamptons is in my mother's name, but she's no longer in a condition to manage that kind of property. She has episodes of confusion, forgets things. My blood turned to ice. Episodes of confusion? Forgetting things? No, she hasn't been officially diagnosed, but it's clear she needs supervision. Just yesterday, she forgot to turn off the stove. A lie. A complete lie. I had never forgotten to turn off the stove. I had never had an episode of confusion. I understand you need medical documentation, but I'm sure any geriatric specialist would certify her incapacity. In the meantime, as her only son, I believe I have the legal right to make decisions on her behalf. My legs trembled so much I had to grab the doorframe to keep from falling. My son. My only son. The baby I breastfed for 2 years because the doctor said it would make him stronger. The teenager I defended when everyone criticized his bad grades. The young man I supported when he lost jobs due to irresponsibility was fabricating a story that I had dementia to steal my house. The current market value is around $1.5 million, maybe more with the renovations it needs. Yes, it's an excellent investment for the family portfolio. Family portfolio. My house, where Robert and I had spent the happiest summers of our lives, where we had made love under the stars, where we had planned to grow old together watching the sea from the porch, was now part of a family portfolio. No, she doesn't suspect a thing. In fact, she's here at the house helping us with the chores. It's the perfect situation. She feels useful, and we can observe her mental deterioration up close. Observe my mental deterioration. The words echoed in my head like funeral bells. It all made sense now. They hadn't asked me to come to help with the house or the kids. They had brought me here to document a supposed dementia that would justify stripping me of my property. Every time I asked something twice because I hadn't heard correctly, Jessica would exchange meaningful glances with Michael. Every time I looked around the house for my reading glasses, they would whisper to each other. Every time I took an extra moment to remember the name of a product at the grocery store, they would mentally note it as evidence of my incompetence. I figure in 2 months we can have all the paperwork ready. In the meantime, we'll keep her here, comfortable and under observation. Comfortable. On a damp mattress, eating their leftovers, working like an unpaid slave. Under observation. Like a criminal awaiting sentencing. I backed away from the door on legs I couldn't feel, as if walking on cotton. I made it to the laundry room, my laundry room, and bolted the door. I took my purse from the closet where I hid it under old towels and touched the manila envelope with trembling fingers. The document I had signed at the lawyer's office was no longer just a precaution. It was my only weapon against a betrayal so deep my mind was struggling to fully process it. I sat on the edge of the mattress and looked out the small window that faced the backyard. There, Jessica was sunbathing on an Italian designer lounge chair, a cocktail in her hand and wireless headphones on, while my grandchildren played alone in the yard because their mother was too busy relaxing to pay them any attention. The woman who refused to change a diaper because it grossed her out, who had never cooked a homemade meal for her children because that's what delivery is for, who complained of being exhausted after spending 2 hours at the spa. That woman had conspired with my son to have me declared mentally incompetent. For the first time in 3 weeks, I smiled, but it wasn't a smile of joy. It was the smile of a woman who had just discovered that pain has its limits, that humiliation can be transformed into determination, and that even the most tolerant mothers have a breaking point. I opened the manila envelope carefully, as if it were a Christmas present. The legal document was there, waiting for me, with all its clauses and official seals that turned my words into law. Definitive revocation of any and all inheritance rights to the property located in Southampton. The words seemed to shine on the paper like a promise of justice. That night, as I served dinner and listened to Michael complain that the meat was overcooked and Jessica criticized the presentation of the dishes, I was smiling on the inside. They thought they were in control. They had no idea what was coming. The first time I said no in that house was on a Friday morning, when Jessica asked me to hand wash her collection of French lace bras because the machine is too harsh and they each cost $200. I just stood there, my hands still damp from washing the breakfast dishes, looking her in the eye for the first time in weeks. Jessica was lounging on the Italian leather sofa, an avocado face mask on, and her nails freshly painted a pink that looked like diluted blood. No, I said simply. The word came out of my mouth as if it had a will of its own, clear and firm, echoing in the morning silence of the house. Jessica blinked several times, as if she hadn't understood what she'd just heard. "Excuse me? I'm not washing your underwear," I repeated, feeling something straighten in my spine. "You have a washing machine, a dryer, and 2 perfectly functional hands." Jessica sat up so fast the mask cracked around her eyes. Her expression shifted from surprise to outrage in a matter of seconds. "Excuse me? Carol, I am pregnant. My doctor told me to avoid any unnecessary strain. Besides, you're here to help with the housework." "I'm here because my son told me he needed me," I corrected her, drying my hands on the kitchen towel I had embroidered myself years ago. "I didn't realize that meant becoming your personal maid." Color rose in her cheeks above the green mask. I had never seen her so flustered. For a moment, she seemed at a loss for words, as if recalibrating her strategy. "I'm going to talk to Michael," she finally announced, getting up from the sofa with exaggeratedly careful movements, as if the simple act of standing was a heroic feat worthy of admiration. "Perfect," I replied, surprising myself with how calm my voice sounded. "Tell him I'm in the garden reading. I haven't taken a break in a while." And that's what I did. I went out to the backyard, sat down in one of their expensive teak chairs, and opened the paperback I always carried with me, 100 Years of Solitude by Garcia Marquez, the same copy Robert had given me for our first anniversary, which I had read at least 20 times. I hadn't even reached the second page when I heard shouting from inside. Jessica had found Michael in his office and was giving him her version of events with the dramatic indignation of a soap opera actress. "Your mother has lost her mind. She disrespected me in front of the children. She can't talk to me like that in my own home." Michael's voice sounded confused, as if he'd been woken from a deep nap. "What happened exactly?" "I asked her to help me with the laundry, and she just said no, just like that, as if I were a stranger. Michael, I'm pregnant. I can't be doing physical labor." The doctor was very clear about that. I sat very still in my chair, pretending to read, but listening to every word that filtered through the open windows. It was fascinating to hear how Jessica turned her request for me to wash her luxury lingerie into a simple plea for help with the laundry. "Mom," I heard Michael's voice call from the kitchen door. His tone was the same one he used as a teenager when he'd done something wrong, but hoped I'd be foolish enough not to notice. "I'm out here," I answered without looking up from my book. Michael walked into the garden with slow steps, like a diplomat approaching a conflict zone. He stood in front of me, partially blocking the sun, casting a shadow that cooled my face. "Mom, Jessica told me you two had a misunderstanding this morning." "There was no misunderstanding," I said, marking my page with a finger and finally looking up at him. "Your wife asked me to hand wash her underwear, and I said no. It's quite clear." Michael ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture he'd inherited from his father. "Mom, Jessica's pregnant. She's very sensitive and needs extra help. You've always been understanding in delicate situations." "Understanding?" The word came out with more bitterness than I intended. "Michael, I have been in this house for 3 weeks, cleaning, cooking, taking care of your children, sleeping on a damp mattress in the utility room, and not once have you thanked me. Now I'm not being understanding because I refuse to wash $200 panties." He sat in the chair next to me, moving closer the way he used to as a child when he wanted to ask for something important. For a moment, I saw a flicker of the loving sun I remembered, and my heart softened dangerously. "Mom, I know we've been maybe a little thoughtless, but we're so stressed with the new baby coming, with the bills, with work. Jessica isn't being malicious. She just needs to feel supported." "And who supports me, Michael?" The question hung between us like smoke. I saw my son's eyes drift to the flowers in the garden, to anywhere but my face. "You're strong, Mom. You've always been strong. We need you. You need me," I repeated slowly. "For what, exactly?" To help us. To be a part of the family. Michael, I am your mother. I have been part of this family since you were born. I don't have to earn that spot by working as an unpaid employee." He rubbed his face with both hands, and when he lowered them, I saw something in his expression I hadn't seen in years. Genuine guilt. "You're right," he admitted in a low voice. "We've been selfish. But you can stay as long as you want, Mom. This is your house too." "No," I said, closing the book with a sharp sound that cut the morning air. "This is not my house. This is your house, where I work for free in exchange for your tolerance. My house is in Queens, in the apartment where your father and I were happy, where I have my things, my memories, my dignity." Michael seemed surprised by the firmness in my voice. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. "You want to leave?" "I think it's for the best," I answered, standing up from the chair. "Clearly what you need is a housekeeper, not a mother. And I am nobody's employee." At that moment, as if she had been waiting behind the door, Jessica appeared in the garden. She had taken off the face mask, and her face showed a mix of contained rage and poorly hidden panic. "Carol, don't be so dramatic," she said with that forced smile she used in front of people. "We had a silly misunderstanding. All families argue now and then. There's no need to make a mountain out of a molehill." "A silly misunderstanding?" I turned to face her directly. "Jessica, you've had me working like a slave for 3 weeks. You've made me sleep in the laundry room, eat your leftovers, clean up your messes without a single word of thanks. And now that I complain, I'm being dramatic." "But you—" Jessica started, but I cut her off. "I what, Jessica? Say it. That I'm old? That I'm not good for anything else? That I should be grateful you allow me to exist in your perfect house?" Michael stood up quickly, placing himself between us as if we were two boxers about to start a match. "Mom, please, Don't be like this. We can solve this like adults. Like adults, I repeated, and I laughed. It was a dry, humorless laugh that came from a deep place in my chest. Do you know what adults do, Michael? They pay for the services they receive. They treat people with respect. They don't trick their mothers into coming to work for free while they plot to steal their property. The silence that followed was so thick you could have cut it with a knife. I saw the color drain from Michael's face, saw Jessica's eyes widen with something that might have been fear. What are you talking about? Michael asked, but his voice sounded fake, too high-pitched. I think you know perfectly well, I said, and walked towards the house. I'm leaving this afternoon. Thank you for showing me who you really are. Behind me, I heard Jessica whisper urgently to Michael. What does she know? How could she know about the Hamptons house? I didn't turn around. I kept walking toward the laundry room to pack my bag, feeling for the first time in weeks that my feet were on solid ground. The document in my purse seemed to weigh less now. It was no longer a secret burden. It was my letter of freedom. Packing my bag took exactly 12 minutes. My entire life in that house fit into a worn-out travel bag that Robert had used for his business trips. As I folded my few clothes, the same cotton blouses I washed by hand every night, the pants that had faded from overuse, the wool cardigan that kept me warm in the cold early mornings of the utility room, I felt something strange. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't anger. It was relief. For the first time in 3 weeks, there was no mental list of tasks waiting for me. I didn't have to plan what to cook for dinner, what cleaning supplies I needed to buy with my own pension, what clothes had to be ironed before nightfall. It was as if an invisible weight had been lifted from my shoulders, one I had been carrying for so long I had forgotten what it felt like to walk upright. As I zipped up the bag, I heard agitated voices from the living room. Michael and Jessica were arguing in urgent whispers, like conspirators who had just discovered their secrets were known. How could she know about the house? Did you accidentally say something? Of course not. She must have overheard my call on Thursday. Damn it, Jessica. I told you to keep your voice down when we talked about it. So what do we do now? If she leaves like this, she could ruin all our plans. She's not going to leave. She's my mother. She always comes back in the end. She always comes back in the end. Those words hurt more than I expected, not because they were cruel, but because they were true. For decades, every time Michael had disappointed, humiliated, or used me, I had come back. I always found an excuse, a justification, a reason to forgive and forget. But this time was different. This time, I had the document. I walked out of the utility room with my bag and headed for the front door, passing through the living room where Michael and Jessica fell silent as they saw me. Their faces showed a mixture of surprise and poorly concealed panic. "Mom, wait," Michael said, getting up from the sofa as if to physically stop me. "We can't end like this. We're family." I stopped and turned to look at him. For a moment, I studied his face, the brown eyes he had inherited from Robert, the straight nose that had given him an elegance even as a child, the mouth that smiled less frequently with each passing year. My son, my only son, the child I had rocked for entire nights when he had a fever, whom I had defended against unfair teachers, whom I had applauded at every small achievement of his childhood. "Michael," I said with a calmness that surprised me, "you stopped being my family the day you decided to steal my house by inventing that I have dementia. Now you're just a man who took advantage of an old woman who had the misfortune of giving birth to him." Jessica gasped. Michael turned pale as if he'd been slapped. "Mom, No," I interrupted, raising a hand. "There's nothing more to say. Have a good life," and I left. The New York City air greeted me like an embrace. It was a cool but sunny November day, with that deep blue sky you only see in the fall after the wind has swept the pollution from the clouds. I took a deep breath for the first time in weeks, feeling the oxygen fill my lungs without the constant weight of anxiety. Instead of taking the subway to my apartment, I decided to walk. I needed to feel my feet on the city pavement, to remember that New York was as much mine as anyone else's, that I had a right to take up space on its streets without asking permission. I walked down through Midtown, watching the people pass by, executives hurrying to important meetings, young mothers pushing strollers while talking on the phone. Elderly men sitting on benches feeding pigeons breadcrumbs. They all had their own lives, their own problems, their own joys. None of them knew I had just escaped from a domestic prison, and that normality was comforting. I stopped at a coffee shop in Greenwich Village I hadn't visited in years, one of those small, cozy places that resist the onslaught of big commercial chains. The owner, a man my age with a gray mustache and a coffee-stained apron, smiled at me as if I were a regular. "What can I get for you, ma'am?" "A latte and toast with jam, please," I replied, realizing it had been weeks since I had ordered something just for myself, without having to think about the tastes or needs of others. I sat by the window and watched the morning traffic. A city bus pulled up to the stop across the street, letting off several passengers who immediately scattered in different directions, each to their own life, their own destiny. For the first time in decades, I too had a choice about my destiny. The coffee was perfect. Not too strong, not too weak, with the milk foam forming little patterns on the surface. The toast crunched between my teeth, and the jam tasted like real fruit, not the bland stuff Jessica bought at the expensive supermarket because it looked better. I took out my cell phone, a basic model Michael always criticized for being ancient, and dialed the number for Eleanor Vance, my lawyer. It was Friday afternoon, but I knew she often worked late on Fridays to make up for time spent in court during the week. "Vance Law, how can I help you?" "Ms. Vance, this is Carol Henderson. I need to see you as soon as possible. It's about the document we signed last week." "Of course, Mrs. Henderson. Has something happened?" "I've discovered my son is trying to have me declared mentally incompetent to take possession of my house in the Hamptons. I think it's time to enforce the revocation." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and then I heard the sound of pages being turned quickly. "Can you come in on Monday at 9 in the morning? I need to prepare some additional documents to fully protect your interests." "I'll be there," I confirmed, feeling a determination I hadn't experienced in years. After hanging up, I sat in the coffee shop for over an hour, simply existing. I was in no hurry to get anywhere. I didn't have to prepare anyone's meal. I didn't have to clean anything or iron anything or worry if someone needed something from me. I was free. When I finally arrived at my apartment in Queens, the building welcomed me like an old friend. The doorman, Sebastian, greeted me with genuine joy. "Mrs. Henderson, so good to see you. I was worried, haven't seen you around in days." "I've been away," I lied gently. "How's your granddaughter? Is she over the flu?" Sebastian lit up talking about his family, and we chatted for a few minutes about normal, everyday things, with no drama. It was a real conversation between two people who respected each other, so different from the tense, resentful exchanges I'd been having at Michael's house. My apartment smelled musty from being closed up, but not damp like the utility room. It smelled of my perfume, of the books I had been reading before I left, of the beeswax I used to polish the furniture Robert and I had bought together over the years. It smelled like home. I sat in my favorite armchair, a green velvet one that had belonged to my mother, and looked around. My small living room, with its modest but well-cared-for furniture, its family photographs in simple frames, its lace curtains I had sewn myself. It wasn't luxurious like Michael's house. It had no marble or Italian design or state-of-the-art technology, but it was mine, completely mine. That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept for 8 straight hours in my own bed, between my own sheets, with my own pillow that knew the exact shape of my head. I didn't wake up every 2 hours thinking about the chores that awaited me the next day. I didn't dream of dirty dishes or clothes to be ironed or children shouting orders. I dreamt of the sea in the Hamptons, of Robert and me walking on the beach at sunset, of the house we had built together, brick by brick, dream by dream. And when I woke up on Saturday morning, with the sun filtering through my bedroom curtains, I knew with absolute certainty that I would never again let anyone steal my dignity. The document was waiting in my purse, ready to protect what was mine, and I was ready to use it. On Monday morning, I wore my best suit, the same navy blue one I had worn to Michael's wedding, with small mother-of-pearl buttons that shone like pearls in the light. I combed my gray hair back into an elegant bun, put on the gold earrings Robert had given me for our 15th anniversary, and looked in the mirror. The woman who looked back was not the defeated old woman who had been cleaning other people's toilets a week ago. She was Carol Henderson, owner of 2 properties, widow of a hard-working and honest man, mother of an ungrateful son. Ms. Vance's office was in a stately early 20th century building in Midtown, with high ceilings and gold molding that spoke of a time when justice still dressed with dignity. I arrived 10 minutes early because punctuality was a virtue my parents had instilled in me as a child, one I had never lost, not even in the darkest of times. Mrs. Henderson, Ms. Vance greeted me, a woman in her late 50s with perfectly coiffed gray hair and metal-rimmed glasses that gave her an imposing air of seriousness. Please, sit down. I've been reviewing your case all morning, and I have good news. She sat behind her dark mahogany desk, covered in files and legal codes, and opened a folder labeled with my name. The revocation document you signed last week is completely valid and binding. Your son has no legal right to your property in the Hamptons, and any attempt at fraudulent transfer can be criminally prosecuted. I felt a wave of relief so intense that for a moment I thought I was going to cry, but I didn't. I had cried enough over Michael. Furthermore, the lawyer continued, I have prepared a cease and desist order that clearly states that any future claims on your properties by your son will be considered misappropriation. This will protect you completely. What does that mean exactly? It means, Mrs. Henderson, that if your son again tries to take possession of your assets using any legal stratagem, declarations of mental incompetence, forged powers of attorney, or any other maneuver, he will face criminal charges. And believe me, the courts are not lenient with children who defraud their elderly mothers. The phrase elderly mothers bothered me a little. I didn't feel elderly, just experienced, but I understood that in legal terms, my age was an additional protection. When can all this be made effective? Today, I have prepared an official notification protocol. A process server can deliver the documents personally to the address you provide. Westchester, The Oaks Development, number 47 Rosewood Lane. The lawyer took note with clear, precise handwriting. Are you absolutely certain of this decision, Mrs. Henderson? Once these documents are served, the legal break with your son will be final and irreversible. More certain than I've been of anything in my life, I replied without hesitation. 2 hours later, while having a coffee at a cafe in Greenwich Village and watching the college students who filled the nearby tables with their laughter and intact dreams, my cell phone rang with the insistence of a fire alarm. Michael. I let it ring. He called back immediately. I let it ring again. On the 3rd try, I decided to answer. Hello? Mom! His voice was desperate, like a child who had just broken something very expensive. We need to talk. A process server just came with some papers. I don't understand what's happening. I understand it perfectly, I replied calmly, stirring my coffee with the small silver spoon the waiter had brought. Mom? This is serious. It says here you're accusing me of misappropriation, that if I try to claim anything of yours I could go to jail. Did you sign this? Every word. There was a silence so long I thought the call had dropped. You can't be serious, he finally said, his voice shifting from desperation to disbelief. I'm your son, Mom. Your only son. That's precisely why it hurts so much to have to do this. But I never wanted to hurt you. Everything I did was for the good of the family. Inventing that I have dementia is for the good of the family, Michael? Another silence. Shorter, but heavier. I don't... How do you know that? I heard your phone conversation last Thursday. Every word, including the part where you said it was perfect to have me at home to document my mental deterioration. I heard him choke back a sob on the other end of the line. Mom, I can explain. It wasn't what it seemed. You were stealing from me, Michael. From your own mother. With premeditation, as they say in the movies. I would never have left you with nothing. The idea was to sell the house and share the money. You could have bought yourself a smaller, easier-to-maintain apartment. It was for your own good. For my own good, I repeated, and I laughed. It was a soft, unbitter laugh, as if I had just heard something genuinely amusing. Do you know what's really for my good, Michael? Not having to wash your wife's underwear. Not having to sleep on a damp mattress while you two sleep in a $1,000 bed. Not having to pretend I don't hear her call me that old woman who smells damp. Jessica never said that. Michael, please. Don't insult me by adding lies to your betrayal. There were voices in the background. Jessica was speaking urgently to him, but I couldn't make out the words. When he came back to the phone, his tone had changed again. Now it sounded calculated, manipulative. Mom, I know you're angry, and you have every right to be. But think about it. Do you really want to destroy your own family over a misunderstanding? The kids need you. I need you. We can start over, do things right this time. The kids need me? The question came out sadder than I intended. Michael, your children don't even say hello to me when I walk into a room. To them, I'm the lady who cleans up their mess, not their grandmother. That can change. We can teach them to respect you more. I don't want to be taught respect, Michael. Respect isn't taught like multiplication tables. It's either felt or it's not. And you two clearly don't feel it. Mom, you can't do this. I'm all you have. Those words hit me like a punch to the gut. For a moment, I was breathless, because they held an echo of truth that hurt more than any direct insult. It was true that Michael was my only immediate family. It was true that at 63, my social options were limited. It was true that the friendships of my generation had faded over the years, some through death, others through distance, many through simple neglect. But then I looked around me. I saw the college students laughing at the next table. I saw the waiter who had smiled genuinely at me when I ordered my coffee. I saw an elderly woman at a corner table reading a book with an expression of pleasant concentration, completely absorbed in her own company. You're wrong, I finally said. I have myself, and after 63 years, I've discovered that's more than I thought. Mom, no, Michael, it's over. The documents have been served. My lawyer has clear instructions. If you bother me again, if you try any legal maneuvers, if you show up at my apartment uninvited, you will face the corresponding legal consequences. You can't be serious. As serious as when I signed your birth certificate 35 years ago. As serious as when I emptied my savings to pay for your wedding. As serious as when I sold my mother's ring to help you buy your first apartment. My voice had grown firmer with each sentence, until it became something I didn't recognize as my own. It was the voice of a woman who had found her power after decades of giving it away to others. Goodbye, Michael. I hung up before he could reply. My phone immediately rang again. I turned it off. I sat at that cafe until the sun began to set behind the buildings of Greenwich Village, watching life carry on its normal course around me. People going in and out of shops, couples holding hands, children chasing pigeons they could never catch. The world hadn't stopped just because I had cut the last thread connecting me to my son. The earth kept spinning. New York was still New York, and I was still me. Except now, I was a version of myself who was no longer afraid of being alone. Because I had learned the difference between loneliness and freedom, and for the first time in decades, I was completely free. 3 months after I hung up on Michael for the last time, I woke up in my own bed and didn't recognize the woman who looked back at me from the bedroom mirror, not because I had changed drastically physically, but because something in my eyes was completely different. There was a light there I hadn't seen since before Robert died, a spark of curiosity, of expectation, of life. It was a Tuesday in February, one of those New York days when the winter sun filters through the windows with a crystal clarity that makes everything look freshly washed. I put on my pink fleece robe, the same one Michael always criticized for being old, and prepared my breakfast without rushing. Toast with homemade bitter orange marmalade I had learned to make from a recipe I found online, freshly ground coffee from a local shop where the owner already knew me by name, and a glass of grapefruit juice that I drank while reading the newspaper from cover to cover, including the sections I used to find boring. I had all the time in the world, and for the first time in decades, that time belonged entirely to me. After breakfast, I opened the laptop I had bought with the money I used to spend on gifts for grandchildren who never thanked me. It was a basic model, but good enough for what I needed. Looking up things that had always interested me, but that I'd never had time to explore. Painting classes for seniors, book clubs at the library, volunteering at nursing homes, group trips for solo travelers. A whole world of possibilities that had been there all along, just waiting for me to have the courage to reach for it. Why didn't I do this sooner? I asked myself out loud, and my voice sounded strange in the apartment's silence. It wasn't the heavy, tense silence of Michael's house, where every calm moment was just a breath before the next humiliation. It was a silence full of possibility, as comfortable as a soft blanket. The answer came immediately, because before, I wasn't free. I had been so busy being the perfect mother, the perfect wife, the tolerant mother-in-law, that I had forgotten I was also Carol, just Carol, and Carol had a right to her own interests, her own dreams, her own time. That very afternoon, I signed up for a watercolor class at a community art center in the village. The teacher was a 40-year-old woman with purple-dyed hair and a genuine smile that reminded me why I had loved this part of the city so much when I was young. "Have you painted before?" she asked as she handed me a brush and a palette of colors that looked like little puddles of joy. "A long time ago," I replied. "When I was young, I used to paint watercolors of flowers, but I stopped when I got married. My husband said it was an expensive and unnecessary hobby." The teacher, whose name was Alexandra, looked at me with an expression that was a mix of understanding and sadness. "Well, now is the perfect time to pick it up again. There's no age limit on reclaiming the things that make us happy." My first watercolor in over 30 years was an absolute disaster. The colors bled together into brown puddles. The shapes I tried to paint were unrecognizable, and I ended up with more paint on my hands than on the paper. But when I looked at the final result, an abstract blur of blues and greens that could have been a garden scene from a great distance, I felt a deep satisfaction I hadn't experienced in years. It was mine, completely mine. No one could criticize it, improve it, or suggest I should be doing something more useful with my time. "It's very good for your first time in a while," Alexandra commented. And though it was probably just professional courtesy, it made me smile like a little girl who had just gotten a gold star in her notebook. In the weeks that followed, I established a routine that filled me in a way I hadn't expected. Mondays and Wednesdays, painting class. Tuesdays, volunteering at the local library, helping children who struggled with reading. Thursdays, a book club where we discussed novels with the passion of college students analyzing sacred texts. Fridays were free for whatever I felt like. Walking through Central Park, visiting museums, or just staying home and reading without anyone interrupting me. The weekends were for me. I cooked dishes I loved without worrying if anyone else would approve. I listened to classical music at full volume. I rearranged my furniture to my own liking, without consulting anyone's opinion. One afternoon in April, as I was painting on my small balcony overlooking the building's courtyard, Sebastian, the doorman, came up with the mail. "Mrs. Henderson," he said with that warm smile that had greeted me every day since I truly started living in my home again, "a certified letter arrived for you." The sender was a law firm I didn't recognize. For a moment, I felt a pang of anxiety. Had Michael found some way to attack me legally? Had he discovered a loophole my lawyer hadn't foreseen? But when I opened the letter, the reality was completely different. "Dear Mrs. Henderson, we are writing to inform you that Mr. Michael Henderson has retained our services to initiate a process of family reconciliation. Our client wishes to express his profound regret for the misunderstandings that occurred, and respectfully requests a meeting to discuss the terms of a possible reconciliation." I stopped reading after the first few lines, not because I was angry, but because I no longer cared. The Michael I had known, the boy I had raised with so much love, had disappeared a long time ago. The man who had sent me this letter was a stranger who happened to share my DNA. I folded the letter carefully and put it in the drawer where I kept important documents. I didn't throw it away, because I might need it as evidence if Michael tried to bother me again. But I gave it no more importance than I would a gas bill. That night, I called Ms. Vance to inform her about the letter. "It was to be expected," she said in that professional voice I had come to appreciate. "Children who commit this type of financial abuse often attempt reconciliation when they realize their victims aren't coming back. But you are under no legal or moral obligation to respond." "I wasn't planning to," I assured her. "I just wanted you to be aware in case the situation escalates. You've made the right decision, Mrs. Henderson. Maintaining no contact is the only way to fully protect yourself from future manipulation." After hanging up, I sat in my favorite armchair with a cup of chamomile tea and reflected on how strange it was to feel so at peace with a decision that, objectively, should have broken my heart. I had completely cut off contact with my only son. I would not meet the baby Jessica was expecting. My grandchildren would grow up without really knowing their grandmother. In theory, I should have been devastated. Instead, I felt free, as if I had been carrying a backpack full of rocks for decades and had finally found the courage to set it down. 2 weeks later, as I was waiting for my painting class to start, an older woman sat down next to me on the park bench where I liked to read before heading into the arts center. She must have been in her 70s, with snow-white hair and an elegant bun and very lively blue eyes. "Are you going to the watercolor class?" she asked, pointing to the bag where I kept my brushes and paints. "Yes, are you? It's my first class. I just moved to New York to be near my daughters. But after 2 months here, I decided I need to do something for myself. They're so busy with their own lives, and I was going stir-crazy." She introduced herself as Helen Ross, a widow for 5 years, mother of 3 daughters who lived in the city, and had insisted she move from Boston to be closer to family. "But it turns out that being physically close doesn't mean being emotionally close," she confessed with an ironic smile. "My daughters visit once a week, take me to the doctor when needed, and make sure I have food in the fridge. But I basically live like a well-cared-for pet." Her words resonated with me in a way that surprised me. Although our situations were different, there was something familiar in her tone, in that mix of resignation and rebellion that I recognized in my own voice from a few months ago. "And how do you feel about that?" At first, I thought it was normal, that at our age, our role is to be cared for and stay out of the way. But after spending 3 straight days without talking to anyone but the grocery delivery guy, I realized I was dying on the inside. We walked to the arts center together, and during that brief conversation, I discovered something unexpected. Helen made me laugh. She had a dry sense of humor and a perspective on life that I found refreshing after so many years of tense interactions with Michael and Jessica. In class, we painted side by side. Her watercolors were as disastrous as mine had been at first, but she laughed at her mistakes with a contagious joy that made the whole class feel more relaxed. "Want to get coffee after?" she asked as we finished, cleaning our brushes at the communal sink. It was the first time in years someone had invited me to do something simply because they enjoyed my company, not because they needed something from me. "I'd love to," I replied, and I meant it completely. That afternoon, sitting at a small cafe on a side street in the village, Helen and I talked for 3 hours. About our marriages, our children, our frustrated dreams, and our new ones. It wasn't a sad or bitter conversation. It was liberating. "You know what the strangest thing is?" she said, as she stirred her second latte. "I thought that at 70, I had already lived everything there was to live, but now I feel like my real life has just begun." I looked at this woman I had just met, with her bright eyes and genuine smile, and I knew exactly what she meant. "Me too," I admitted. "For the first time in decades, I look forward to waking up in the morning just to see what will happen." And it was true. Completely true. The months passed as if time had decided to grant me a second youth. Mornings were no longer service calls or contemptuous glances. They were blank canvases. Each day began with the aroma of my own coffee, in my own kitchen, in my own home. Loneliness ceased to be a sad echo and became a silence that belonged to me. I signed up for more watercolor courses and discovered that water and color have a patience that humans sometimes forget. I painted crooked flowers, messy skies, endless seas, and every stroke was a declaration. I am still here. I am still alive. One random Tuesday, as I was putting my brushes away, the phone rang. It was an unknown number. I hesitated to answer, but something inside me pushed me to. "Mom?" Michael's voice sounded rougher, with a tremor I had never heard before. "I need to see you." I closed my eyes. We hadn't spoken in 4 months, and in that silence, I had found a peace I had no intention of sacrificing. "Why?" I asked, without any softness. There was a long pause, filled with voids he couldn't fill. I'm in the hospital. It's not serious, but I thought of you." I hung up without promising anything. I spent the rest of the day painting a raging sea, and in every wave, I placed the words I never got to say to him, that his pain didn't erase his betrayal, that his blood didn't give him the right to my life. By nightfall, however, something drew me to the hospital. Not for him, but for me. I wanted to face this story head-on and know that my decision was my own. When I entered the room, Michael was pale, a bandage on his head and his eyes weary. Jessica wasn't there. He looked at me with a mixture of surprise and relief. "I fell down the stairs at the subway station," he murmured, "and the first thing I thought of was you." I stood there, a few feet from his bed. "Thinking of me doesn't erase what you did," I replied. His eyes filled with tears I couldn't tell were from pain or fear. "I know. I don't deserve your forgiveness. I wanted to see you. I didn't touch him. I didn't hug him. I wished him well and left." In the hallway, the weight of years of guilt fell away like an old coat. I understood that visiting him wasn't a surrender, but a confirmation of my freedom. I could be present without becoming his shadow again. Spring arrived in New York with clear skies and cherry blossoms that filled the streets with color. My life had its own rhythm. Painting classes, walks in Central Park, long coffees with Helen, the friend fate gave me at just the right moment. Together, we planned a trip to the Hamptons for the summer. I would return to the house by the sea, not to escape, but to celebrate it. When we arrived, the Atlantic greeted us with its salty breeze and eternal roar. I opened the windows, and the smell of damp wood enveloped me like a hug from Robert. I walked through every room, remembering Michael's childhood summers, the laughter that once filled these walls. I didn't feel hatred. I felt gratitude for what I had lived, and determination for what I had chosen to protect. One afternoon, as I painted the horizon, I heard footsteps on the sand. It was Michael. I wasn't surprised. He knew the address by heart. He approached slowly, without his former arrogance. "I just wanted to see the house one more time," he said. "I'm not here to ask for anything. I know I lost it forever." I watched him in silence. The sea roared behind him, a reminder that some things are bigger than all of us. "The only thing I ask," he continued, "is that one day, when you think it's possible, you let me explain to my children who you really are. I want them to know the fault was mine." I didn't answer. It wasn't a yes or a no. It was simply the truth. Forgiveness isn't begged for. It's earned over time. And he would have to walk that path alone. That night, Helen and I toasted on the porch with a glass of white wine. "To freedom," she said, raising her glass. "To the life that begins when we stop living for others," I replied. The stars lit up over the ocean, and in their light, I understood that my story was not one of loss, but of rebirth. Today, as I tell you this, I know that many people confuse love with infinite sacrifice. I confused it for years. I thought being a mother meant enduring everything. But true love doesn't demand you give up yourself. Loving also means knowing when to say enough, to protect who we are, to choose ourselves. Life taught me that dignity is non-negotiable, not even with your own child. And that solitude, when born from freedom, is a garden where dreams can bloom again. Life lesson: never let love, not even a mother's love, become a chain. Respect begins with yourself, and only when you choose you, do others learn to truly see you. Have you ever had to set a painful boundary to protect your dignity? Reply in the comments and share your experience. If this story touched your heart, leave your like and subscribe so this message can reach those who need it most.